The sky was still smoldering. Ash floated in the air like falling judgment, soft but unrelenting. The earth behind them glowed faintly, as if God himself had just exhaled fire. They escaped, but escape doesn't always mean freedom. Lot and his daughters had fled the inferno that devoured Sodom. They ran with blistered feet and tear-streaked faces, clutching the last fragments of a life erased. Their mother didn't make it. She turned back and turned into a statue of salt. A woman frozen in longing, a pillar of warning. Now the three of them sat in a cave carved into the mountain. No food, no future, just silence and smoke-stained memories. This is where the story begins. Not in Sodom, not with the angels, but in the darkness after deliverance. Lot didn't always live in caves. He once walked beside Abraham, sharing laughter beneath starlit tents. He once built altars, prayed aloud, led with conviction. But one day, he looked toward the cities of the plain, lush and green, seductive with promise, and step by step, he walked toward compromise. He didn't move into Sodom in a single moment. He drifted. And by Genesis 19, he isn't just near Sodom, he's part of it. Sitting at the gate, Sodom's council, its leadership, he sees two strangers enter the city, and something in him stirs. He remembers hospitality. He remembers righteousness. He insists they stay with him. But darkness comes quickly. As night falls, footsteps echo, then fists, then voices. An entire mob surrounds the house. They demand the strangers. They demand flesh. And Lot tries to reason with them. He pleads. Then he does the unthinkable. I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you. Did you hear that? This is a man offering his daughters to a violent mob. A father once righteous, now warped by a world he wouldn't leave. This is what compromise looks like. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It tells you this is normal, that survival justifies surrender. But mercy steps in. The angels strike the mob with blindness. They pull Lot back inside, and they say, "Run, take your family, flee the city, don't look back." Lot hesitates. His sons-in-law mock him, his wife disobeys, and as the sky explodes with fire, Lot runs, not with boldness, but with brokenness. He runs with the ashes of failure sticking to his soul. Genesis 19:30. Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. The cave wasn't a home. It was a hiding place, a tomb for the living. Lot no longer speaks. He simply exists. The man who once walked with God is now curled in silence, haunted by everything he lost. And the daughters? They were born in Sodom, raised in a city where love was twisted, where pleasure was worshipped, where women were currency. They had watched their mother turn to salt. They had seen a city burn. They had run without closure. Now, they sat in darkness, and the silence grew louder. There were no husbands, no community, no future, just fear and an unspoken truth. If we do nothing, our line dies here. And so the older daughter whispers to the younger, "There is no man left on the earth to lie with us. Let us get our father drunk." She isn't thinking covenant. She's thinking survival. Because when fear becomes your theology, sin becomes your strategy. The first night arrives. Lot sits by the fire, unaware. His daughter pours wine into a clay cup. She brings it to him. Soft voice, shaky hands. He drinks. One cup, then another, until the fire blurs and memory fades. And in the dark, she enters. No words, just breath, just silence. The next morning, she says nothing. He remembers nothing. The second night comes, and it happens again. Twice, Lot is drunk. Twice, his daughters enter. Twice, the line between protection and violation disappears. And the Bible doesn't flinch. It simply says, so both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. Moab, Ben-Ami, two boys born of trauma. Two bloodlines born from silence, two nations, two futures, two curses, because Moab and Ammon would not become allies. They would become adversaries, enemies of Israel, enemies of the promise. And it all started here, in a cave, after a fire, after a silence. But God doesn't waste chapters. He sees the ones we'd rather tear out. He watches as pain bleeds into decisions, not intervening like we expect, but never looking away. Was he there in the cave? Yes, silent, but sovereign. He didn't stop them. He didn't thunder down or send angels to interrupt. He let it unfold, the fear, the wine, the silence, the confusion. And yet, even as they drifted deeper into the unthinkable, he was already weaving redemption behind the curtain. Because that's the kind of God he is. He doesn't just redeem what's broken, he builds through it. He doesn't just heal what's shattered, he writes lineage through the fracture lines. Even in the folds of their darkest sin, a plan was still breathing, not after, during. A plan wrapped in scandal, rooted in grace, waiting for its hour. And then, centuries later, a young widow named Ruth, Moabite by blood, clings to her mother-in-law and says, "Your God will be my God." To the undiscerning, these may seem like ordinary words, grief-stricken, loyal, poetic perhaps, but still human. But heaven knew better. Ruth spoke what she could not possibly understand. Her lips formed a vow, but her voice echoed something deeper. An ancient script whispered into time. Even Ruth, wrapped in sorrow, moving through fields of loss, had no inkling she was stepping into a redemptive thread that stretched all the way back to a cave and forward to a cradle in Bethlehem. She didn't know. She couldn't have known that she was part of a divine rehearsal, that her yes was not just about survival or loyalty, but destiny. The same God who watched the fire fall on Sodom, the same God who said nothing in the cave, was still writing. He had not abandoned the bloodline. He had not disqualified the broken. Because even in the folds of sin, he plants the seeds of salvation. Even in the wreckage, he builds a road for the Redeemer to walk through. And Ruth was walking it. She leaves her homeland. She works in the fields. She marries a man named Boaz. She gives birth to Obed. Obed fathers Jesse. Jesse fathers David. And from David, the Messiah, Jesus. Yes, the Savior of the world has Moabite blood. Because God doesn't just write redemption, he writes it from the dust, from the ashes, from the scandal, even from a cave. Let's pause here. This isn't just a story about incest. It's a story about silence, about fathers who go quiet, about trauma that replays itself in confused acts. Lot was there, but he wasn't present. His daughters didn't invent brokenness. They reflected what Sodom taught them and what Lot failed to unteach. Because when men lose their voice, daughters learn from the culture. When leaders go passive, families suffer. When trauma is left unspoken, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. And what's conceived in fear can echo for generations. But there's more. This is also a story of mercy. Because even here, in a cave filled with regret, God was already planting a seed that would one day become a throne, a cross, a crown. What about you? What caves have you survived? What silence have you endured? Maybe your story has chapters you'd never read aloud. Maybe shame has written lines you wish could be deleted. But the Bible doesn't skip Genesis 19. And God doesn't skip over you. If He can turn Moab into Ruth, if He can turn incest into legacy, if He can turn ashes into ancestors of Christ, He can redeem your cave too. And even now, there may be something growing in the dark. A redemption still unborn, a future still wrapped in the shame of what was. But God sees it, and He's not finished. Lot's daughters slept with him. Yes, it's in the Bible, not to glorify it, not to excuse it, but to reveal this. God is not afraid of broken places. He doesn't flinch at the dark. He steps in. He sees everything. He tells the whole story. Because that's where redemption begins, right where the world thinks it ends. You might come from a cave. You might carry the weight of decisions made in desperation. But the God who turned Lot's scandal into the story of Christ can still write beauty from the ruins. If this story moved you, subscribe to Trinity Tribe. We go deep into all facets of the Bible because God speaks through every page.